Cloud for Scotland and North East England, and further showers develop, but most of these showers will be in the north, especially for Scotland, drier towards the south, and this drying up trend continues into Thursday and the start of Friday with rising temperatures.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Patrick Christie's, identifying as the formidable Jacob Rees-Mogg. On State of the Nation tonight, a tiny bacteria outbreak on a barge isn't enough to put the government off alternative accommodation for migrants. Student halls are next on the list of options. What next? A state-mandated migrant in your front room. But some students will be starting the academic year in hotels and bunk beds, as many universities reportedly can't guarantee accommodation for them. You know, the ones paying the fees? We are clearly in the grip of a student housing crisis. So how will moving 5,000 migrants into halls of residence that our current students are being denied solve anything? Labour have scrapped the plan to create ULEZ-style zones across the country after the deeply unpopular scheme, arguably costing the Uxbridge by-election. But nonetheless, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has vowed that he will continue to expand the capital's ultra-low emission zone. But this is the really interesting bit. Environmentalist group Extinction Rebellion, yes them, Extinction Rebellion, criticised the ULEZ, and if your plan to lower air pollution doesn't even have the support of eco-loonies, then you really are in trouble. We are looking across the channel next to see what the French police are up to, because it certainly doesn't seem to be stopping illegal migrants from reaching the UK. The number of French police patrolling beaches is down because the country's rules about when they will get involved in stopping the boats feel arbitrary at best. Apparently, they're on holiday. Is France actually partially to blame for the number of illegal migrants who wind up on Britain's shores? Plus, he is a member of America's most famous family, but has so far lived his life in the political shadows. Will Robert F. Kennedy be the unlikely victor of the 2024 presidential race? I will be speaking to journalist Daphne Barak, whose interview with the Kennedys, new figurehead, was aired exclusively on GB News yesterday. I will also be asking her about some shocking revelations involving Barack Obama. You are not going to want to miss that. State of the Nation starts now. But of course, I can't do this on my own. I will be joined by a particularly exemplary panel this evening. Historian and broadcaster, the one and only David Starkey, and GB News' very own senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, will be on the sofa this evening. Remember, we want to hear from you as well, and that email remains the same. It's mailmog@gbnews.com, and I will be delving into that inbox as much as possible tonight, so get your views coming in, get yourself on the telly. But right now, it's time for all your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, our top story on GB News tonight. Police in Northern Ireland say they're confident that leaked data of officers and staff is in the hands of dissident Republicans. Earlier, Sinn Féin confirmed that a redacted version of the police data had been posted on a wall facing its Belfast offices, and it described that as sinister. Last week, the details of 10,000 police officers and staff were inadvertently published online. Chief Constable Simon Byrne addressed a news conference today, and he said police are operating under the assumption that the data will be used to generate fear and uncertainty.
We are now confident that the workforce data set is in the hands of dissident Republicans, and it's therefore a planning assumption that they will use this list to generate fear and uncertainty, as well as intimidating or targeting officers and staff. I won't go into detail for operational reasons, but we are working round the clock to assess this risk and take measures to mitigate it.
Well, in other news today, a construction worker has died after being injured at Everton's new football stadium being built in Liverpool. Police said the 26-year-old man died in hospital earlier following the incident at the construction site in Bramley Moor Dock. The stadium's contractor says work has been suspended until further notice, and Everton said everybody at the club was heartbroken. Now, the government says it's trying to clarify when officials were made aware of the Legionella concerns on board the Bibby Stockholm accommodation barge. That's after Dorset Council said Home Office contractors were told traces of the bacteria were detected on the day asylum seekers boarded it. All 39 people were removed from the vessel on Friday. Downing Street says it expects them to return as soon as possible. Bidders for the high street retailer Wilko have been given until Wednesday to put forward their offers to buy the firm. The general goods chain fell into administration last week, putting the future of its 400 stores and around 12,000 jobs at risk. It's understood administrators from PwC have set the deadline to try to secure a new deal in a bid to try to prevent redundancies. Shoppers in Nottingham said they were disappointed when we asked them today. Now, Network Rail has released video of dangerous behaviour at railway level crossings. Take a look, if you're watching on television, at this CCTV compilation showing a person doing press-ups on the line, dog walkers sitting their pets on the tracks for photographs, and children putting stones on the line as well. Nearly 50 cases of misuse have been reported by train drivers, all caught on camera in Worcestershire and the West Midlands so far this year. Network Rail says it's trying to raise awareness and discourage people from risking their lives on the tracks. You're with GB News across the UK on your TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Now, the latest round of absolute migrant madness will see illegal immigrants housed in student accommodation. Bear in mind that a leaked memo from the Home Office appears to say that they expect the Channel migrant crisis to go on for about another 5 years. Well, we've used military bases, we've used up hotels, we've used up social housing, new houses, new apartments. Now it's student accommodation. I mean, at what point do you have a state-mandated asylum seeker on your sofa? This upcoming academic year will see some fee-paying students have to be put up in hotels or hostels or told to find accommodation in a different city to where their university is, or indeed, in some cases, a different country to where their university is. Those students are saddling themselves with a lifetime of debt, already massively disadvantaged by virtue of the fact that top universities want more foreign students so they can make more money, their lecturers are always on strike, and all of this so that you can get a Desmond Tutu in underwater basket weaving from a former polytechnic. Anyway, there is very much a student housing crisis at the moment. There are also several 100,000 homeless people. There are hundreds of thousands of people who desperately need to flee violent partners, for example. There is no shortage of people who urgently need accommodation. But yet again, everything goes out the window so we can house illegal immigrants. 10 unused student accommodation and former office sites are currently being considered, with each averaging around 500 places per site. The Home Office was previously granted permission to turn former student accommodation in Stafford into a home for 481 asylum seekers. At the start of 2023, the Home Office overcame resistance from the local council in Coventry after making plans to house migrants in former students' accommodation with a capacity for more than 100 people. Apparently, Leicester, Portsmouth, Lincoln, Stoke-on-Trent and Huddersfield are also being considered. I mean, of course they are. At this rate, every single town and city in the UK will have them, as well as migrant hotels, as well as social housing, on top of legal immigration. Now, they'll be using the set of Coronation Street. Emmerdale Farm will just be a migrant commune, won't it? But seriously, how long is it before they say, sorry, we're just putting a tent in your front garden to house some Channel migrants? Can we just imagine, for a second, if we devoted half as much time, attention and creativity towards housing our own needy citizens as we do to bending over backwards for illegal immigrants? Honestly, just look around and ask yourself, where does this end? But of course, I want to know your thoughts. Don't forget to let me know. It's the same email address that you would normally have for the main man, Moggy. It's mailmog@gbnews.com. Joining me now to discuss this is Nick Hillman, director of the think tank, the Higher Education Policy Institute. Nick, look, thank you very, very much. Do you think students have a right to feel a bit aggrieved if they are potentially being told you're going to have to start your academic year in hotels or, dare I say it, even renting a place in a different city, etc., and then they find out, well, we are bending over backwards to put a certain group of people in student accommodation?
Well, look, I understand the thought behind your question, and I think they probably would sometimes feel aggrieved in those circumstances. But I think what's actually happening is there are only a few towns and cities where there's a surplus of student accommodation. You mentioned where they are: Huddersfield, Coventry, Lincoln, Stoke, places like that. More places have a shortage of student accommodation: Manchester, Bristol, York, Glasgow, Edinburgh. They don't have anything like enough student beds. And I don't think they'll find any landlords, any student accommodation providers in those cities willing to talk to the Home Office, especially as it could make those companies rather unpopular with students if they look like they're doing the Home Office.
Well, I wonder if it actually will, Nick, you see. This is the thing, isn't it? Because the students will be in an incredibly difficult situation, simultaneously holding up refugees' welcome banners, whilst also not really liking the fact that they have welcomed refugees into where they're supposed to be living.
Well, of course, lots of students are from other countries. Lots of students, particularly in the nicer student accommodation blocks, are very often from other countries. So you're actually talking about very often two different groups of people from other countries. Look, I understand why the Home Office has its eye on student accommodation, because they're single rooms with lots of bathroom facilities, often quite new. I can see why it works for the Home Office, but of course it is partly an example of Home Office failure to process the numbers more speedily.
No, I mean, 100% it is. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the ultimate reason why this is happening is because we've got so many people crossing the channel and so many of them are staying here for so long because we're not processing them or deporting them or whatever it is that we do with them. And we're also not allowing them to work, which therefore means they've just got to essentially squat somewhere. So, yeah, completely. It's not the fault of the universities. My concern will be, though, that actually what the Home Office has done previously is just dangle a massive bag full of cash in front of people like Holiday Inns, in front of a variety of different places. And what would be stopping them doing this now? Meanwhile, students who saddle themselves with a lifetime of debt for, at times, very questionable university courses will just end up paying and getting into debt and not even having anywhere to live.
Well, it is ironic because traditionally the Home Office has a rather bad relationship with universities because they don't like all the international students coming over. And now they're trying to hug university towns and cities very close to solve a problem of their own making. And there will be landlords, big companies that have knocked up big blocks of student residences in cities like Stoke, where they were worried they weren't going to get their money back on building those buildings. And now the Home Office is coming along as almost a saviour for them.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody somewhere along the line will be making some money from this.
Oh, loads of people will be making loads of money out of it as well. And if some of the deals are true, which I've got no reason to disbelieve they are, this is just with hotel chains, by the way. They say, well, you might as well sack a load of your staff so you don't have to pay anything to do with that. We'll sort your security out with companies like Serco. You won't have any of the overheads, and we will renovate your hotel as and when we eventually stop using this as an asylum seeker hangout. But look, thank you very, very much, Nick. Nick Hillman there, director of the think tank, the Higher Education Policy Institute. I mean, students will be disadvantaged as a result of this if all of this goes ahead. But I am also glad to be joined by my presenter's friend for this evening. That sounds cute, doesn't it? It's Nigel Nelson. Nigel, I'm just moving on specifically from the students' side of it there. We are bending over backwards for Channel migrants. We've got military bases. We might at some point have a barge if we can render it fit for human habitation. We are now looking at student accommodation. We know that we've got social housing. We know we've got all of this stuff. Can you imagine for 1 second if we applied the kind of creativity and desperation towards housing illegal immigrants as we do to housing to people who we've already got homeless in this country?
Well, I think that we should be building more houses. There's no question about that. And yes, we should be redoubling our efforts to that end so people can actually have a home. I mean, where we are with the cross-channel migrants, I think the Bibi Stockholm is a complete gimmick. I don't think that it certainly won't be a deterrent. The idea of housing them in student accommodation, I mean, the idea is former student accommodation. So it would be wrong to chuck a student out to put a migrant in. So if these places are available, then we use them. The whole issue is that what we're not doing is cutting the backlog to stop this happening. So we're talking about 172,000 backlog. That compares to 19,000 back in 2010. If we brought more caseworkers in to process them and did it much quicker, that would bring your hotel bill down and also negate the need for any other accommodation because you'd actually be able to shift them out of the country or they could stay in the country and work and find their own accommodation.
I think when it comes to the backlog, one of the things that I find just incredibly hard to believe is that we cannot process people quicker and we cannot, for all of the money, we've given £500 million to the French to do very little, as far as I can gather, very little. That amount of money could have been spent employing people to plough through our own backlog, could it not? And that just seems idiotic.
Well, I certainly think they should have employed more people. Rishi Sunak promised to. He said that there would be 2,500 caseworkers. There aren't. They're about half that. You need a lot more people to go and do it. So if you look at other countries, for instance, that Austria has more migrants coming in than asylum seekers coming in than we do. They process them within 3 months. Germany does it in a third of the time that we do. France does it in half the time we do. So, in fact, all these things are possible because other countries are doing it.
No, I am inclined to agree with you. I think the biggest thing for me specifically about the accommodation is that if we really had a desire to elevate people in this country who are in need here at the moment, we could do it. And before, we were kind of told, oh, we couldn't. We couldn't have the space or the resources to house everyone who's homeless at the moment, or everyone who's fleeing a partner who's being violent towards them, or anyone who's got a couple of children who desperately need somewhere, a roof over their head in winter. We were kind of told, led to believe that wasn't really possible. And now we are finding out that it is possible because we're doing it for people who just got here illegally.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Bibby Stockholm, for instance, would be very good for a family with kids or something like that. The kind of accommodation
But this accommodation, this is what I'm talking about. You know, this is not luxury
accommodation. This is very basic.
Well, this is student accommodation. So students used to pay money, a lot of money, to live in there.
Yeah.
Right. So it is fit for human habitation. And it could be
but
lived.
The question is why it's former. I mean, obviously there are places where the students are now, which one assumes will be better accommodation than they enjoyed there. So the likelihood of this accommodation is it would be pretty basic. And we've got to do something. I mean, I do appreciate in the short term we need to find somewhere to put people who are coming across because we're not going to stop the boats.
OK, all right, fair enough. Nigel, thank you very, very much. We'll be returning to this topic, but from a slightly different angle a little bit later on in the show. We'll be focusing explicitly really on what the French are getting up to and on what's happening there, because there was a big blame game going on, I think, wasn't there, when sadly those people died in the Channel. And Britain does seem to cop it in situations like that non-stop. Basically, I'm of the view that it's not all our fault all the time. And sometimes, just sometimes, you've got to have a look at what the French are doing, yeah, but also, is there an element of personal responsibility when people get into difficulty in the Channel? Do people know the kind of risks that they're taking? Some people, of course, would say, look, they're desperate, they'll be willing to do anything. We'll be having a little look at that, but thank you very, very much to Nigel Nelson. Don't forget that I will, of course, be taking your emails, mailmog@gbnews.com, but coming up next, I will be doing the one thing I never expected. Yes, that's right, I will be agreeing with the leader of Extinction Rebellion. Plus, like I was talking about, should France hold some of the blame for those migrants who died crossing the Channel over the weekend? Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. I am still not Jacob Rees-Mogg, but I'm doing my best impression of him. This is State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with some of your thoughts. I'm going to go to those right now. Jill's been in touch. Thank you very much, Jill. She says, safe routes for asylum will never stop the boats. In fact, Jill, I spoke to somebody earlier on today who's an expert in border force. They said exactly the same thing, because people don't actually want to be processed the legal way, because that might involve us finding out who they are and where they're from. It is actually, in some cases, more beneficial for them to throw their documents in the channel and then come here, knowing that they will probably be allowed to stay whilst they're here. One more. Margaret says, the police should install roadblocks on approaches to the coastal camps in order to search vehicles for the boats/engines. We need to remove the tools of people smuggling. There should be better checking of every container and vehicle at EU customs. Margaret, it is one of the world's great mysteries to me that we are able to send people to the moon, send people to space, do all sorts of fabulous feats of human engineering. But what we seem categorically incapable of doing is stopping tens of thousands of quite large boats. The words small boats crisis is now quite disingenuous, isn't it? Quite large boats from making their way across an entire continent and to the beaches of Calais, where someone attaches an engine on them, stacks it full of people and pushes them into the channel. I have no idea how it was beyond the wit of man to be able to actually, quite literally, physically stop the boats. But, moving on, Sir Keir Starmer has ditched the plan to roll out ULEZ-style zones across the UK, apparently. Instead, Labour stressed that clean air zones are a Tory government policy and will look for other ways to reduce air pollution, which won't put pressure on hard-working families. This is a really fascinating twist in the old net zero trial, I suppose you could say, with each party trying to outdo each other and row back a bit on what was originally a full frontal agenda. The Labour leader seems to have heard the people's plight, and they don't want to pay £12.50 a day just to get to work, drop the kids off at school. But London Mayor Sadiq Khan has committed, big time, to pressing ahead with the expansion of the capital's ultra-low emission zones next month. Here's another weird twist, a story I never thought I would read. Extinction Rebellion founder, Roger Hallam, spoke out against Mr Khan's plan. He called it intrusive and regressive. Now, I don't normally agree with Extinction Rebellion, as you can imagine, but in this case, I think they are bang on the money. Expanding ULEZ will hit Britain's poorest the hardest, that's what he said. And what's fair about that? He also called it, and again, this is language that you very easily could hear Nigel Farage saying, couldn't you? He says that it was a, kind of metropolitan, uber-liberal, elitist view, ULEZ, which, I mean, I believe is true. I just didn't really think I would hear him saying that. Joining me now is environmentalist and friend of the show, is Tom Burke. Tom, thank you very, very much. Were you as shocked as I was to hear the founder of Extinction Rebellion saying that he doesn't really like ULEZ?
Well, Patrick, just to be exactly correct, what we heard was what the Daily Mail said he'd said. And I'm always pretty cautious when I read the Daily Mail. I don't actually know what...
to my knowledge, he hasn't sued them yet, Tom, to be fair. So let's assume he has said it, and I will stand corrected if he takes them to court.
No, but I'm just always a word of caution when you listen to the Daily Mail. But certainly it would be wrong to say that people that somehow concern for air pollution is a middle-class preoccupation. There are about 4,000 people in London who have premature death because of air pollution every year, and some of them may indeed be urban, middle class, and even left wing. But an awful lot of them are just going to be ordinary people.
Could I just ask about that figure, that figure of about 4,000 people having premature deaths? Because I was reading a report, the Committee on the Medical Effects of Pollution, which said that whilst that is technically true, that 4,000 people might have premature deaths due to air pollution in London, they reckon that death is premature by around 51 to 65 hours per person. And potentially, in extreme situations, you might have died 3 days earlier than you eventually would. So it's not quite the total catastrophe, is it?
Sorry, I think you're just playing with the numbers, Patrick. I don't think it matters very much how long you can do those things with the numbers. Anybody whose death is caused early by air pollution is right to be pretty cross about it. And if you remember what caused this story to become and in fact, Roger Hallam was one of the people who campaigned for tracking air pollution in London before he was involved in Extinction Rebellion. And the reason for that was because, as the coroner declared, when that young girl, Ella, died in 2013, air pollution was the cause of her death. And that's the thing I think that really sticks with in people's minds, and quite correctly. So it really matters that you do something about air pollution. And by the way, when you were introducing this piece, you connected air pollution issues with net zero. Now, these are completely separate issues. There's no, unless you think that the only people who care about
a way I would connect them is the fact that people are going to end up paying for them. And do you think do you not think that it is going to unequivocally hit the poorest in society the hardest, having to pay £12.50 a day to take your car off your drive? You can't necessarily get a new one. I mean, that I think is what he was getting at, isn't it? Which even the leader of Extinction Rebellion is now saying, basically, look, the vast majority of people can't afford it. It's a luxury if you can.
No, he's not saying the vast majority of people can't afford it. He's saying, as you've just quoted, he's saying that the lowest income people will be put at a disadvantage. That's absolutely right. He's right about that. There'll also be, by the way, the people who suffer most from air pollution. And there's an overwhelming body of evidence that shows the people who pay the price of us not dealing with problems. So the real issue is how to make sure that people who can afford it pay. And that's exactly why there's a scrappage scheme to help those people who can't afford it. It's only 1 in 10 of the cars in Uxbridge were affected by it. So I'm not sure that the idea that somehow, other than in the mind of the editors of the Daily Mail,
well, it's interesting again. But it's interesting again. This 1 in 10 figure, right? Because it was actually heard in the High Court by 5 councillors. They said, so this is for Bexley, Bromley, Harrow and Hillingdon, along with Surrey County Council. They massively contested this 1 in 10 figure, and so that they actually don't understand where that figure's come from, and that it's disinformation, they said.
And you're calling it disinformation. I mean, I don't.
Well, they said they couldn't find any proof for it. This is the thing that it was built on this. It was built on this claim, right? That 90, because it makes it sound palatable, doesn't it? 90% of you won't be affected by it, and they said, well, where have you got that from? And they couldn't find out.
I read it in the newspapers too. So if the newspapers are presenting things that are wrong, then shame on the newspapers for doing that. What is definitely the case is it costs about the NHS in London about £600 million a year. That's government's official figures on that to deal with the consequences of air pollution. So it's not only that poor people have to pay a bit, and we should get some help with that, but actually when they're the people who most need the services of the NHS that can't provide them because we're spending money on dealing with the consequences of people who can afford to pay the ULEZ fee driving their cars around in London.
I mean, another argument would be that if people know that there is an ultra-low emission zone and they can't afford it, what they actually will do is drive around it and therefore drive for a longer period of time, causing more pollution.
Well, maybe. I mean, I don't know if that's the kind of thing people say, but, most of us are too busy in our lives to take an extra line to avoid paying £12. Much more important is to think, why are we not supporting those people? And there are some people for whom this will be really difficult. Why are we not supporting them directly with the scrappage scheme? And my understanding is that's available and has been available since January this year.
Do you think we should just have a massive referendum on this?
No.
Why not? Because you might not like the result.
Well, because we might. Let's have a referendum whether we should have GBNews on the air. I don't think you solve complicated, difficult issues.
It affects fewer people. With respect, I think. You know what? I would be the first person to say if GBNews was costing people £12.50 a day and it was going to tell them to do all sorts of different life changes, I would be the first in line to say, you know what, it's the kind of thing we should have a referendum on, right? But it's not. But I tell you what, the ULEZ might. So should we have a referendum on that?
No, we shouldn't have a referendum. It's not the way to deal with issues that are difficult and complex and require lots of trade-offs. You're not going to have a referendum that decides which of the 30,000 people a year that in this country have premature deaths from air pollution should die. I don't think you choose sort these issues. I do think we should have politics which are a bit less, as you like, how can I put it? a bit less considering the evidence and a bit less focused on the headlines, on appeasing the headlines, and more on actually doing the job that people need done by the politicians.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Tom Burke there, keen environmentalist, to say the least. Right, thank you very, very much. We did get in touch with Extinction Rebellion. They did not wish to comment at all. Oh, well. Coming up, are the French being laissez-faire about the illegal channel crossings? Plus, the journalist who scooped an exclusive interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Daphne Barak, will join me later, and I will be asking her about the latest startling revelations, allegedly, in terms of Barack Obama. You're not going to want to miss that.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain today, clearing overnight, a few showers following, but many places will be fine during Tuesday as low pressure moves into the North Sea, taking its weather fronts with it. However, one occluded feature is just providing some additional rainfall to the northeast of England through the night, some damp weather continuing here. Eventually it becomes light to moderate rain. Showers across western areas, drier towards the southeast with some clear spells, but wherever you are, it's not going to be a cold night, 12 to 14 Celsius generally. And it will be a bright start to Tuesday, certainly across southern areas compared with Monday. Plenty of sunshine around. Still the remnants of the cloud and rain clearing from the northeast of England, southeast Scotland first thing, but by mid-morning that's all gone. And then the showers in the west tend to transfer eastwards through the day. The heaviest downpours will be across the central belt and the southern uplands, but elsewhere actually the showers becoming more scattered into the afternoon. A better chance of some sunshine in the south and with light winds feeling much more pleasant. Then we start off Wednesday with a few fog patches in the south and the west, a lot of cloud for Scotland and northeast England, and further showers develop, but most of these showers will be in the north, especially for Scotland, drier towards the south, and this drying up trend continues into Thursday and the start of Friday with rising temperatures.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I remain Patrick Christys, and you've been getting in touch with your thoughts. Let's have a little gander, shall we? Stephen says, this is on ULEZ, the chat that we had before. The head of Extinction Rebellion has come out and basically said that ULEZ is the preserve of middle-class, well-to-do, sopping wet so-and-sos, and they should be cancelled. So I'm paraphrasing. Don't sue me, Roger Hallam. Stephen says, as was said last year by a man in Burnley, here we go, when the wind blows, the clean air goes. So ULEZ should depend on wind speed and direction and free over certain wind speeds. You're getting very technical there, Stephen, very technical. David says, how about all the people pushed out of cars onto the underground system? The air pollution is even worse down on the underground. David, I will never forget my first ever working day in London. I was working overnights. I'd only been to London a couple of times before, and once was just to feed the pigeons in Trafalgar Square when I was young. Remarkably uncultured. But I came down and I got on the Central Line overnight, and then I got off the Central Line and I blew my nose and black stuff came out. The pollution on the underground is absolutely vile. But on that note, ministers are getting increasingly frustrated with France, who appear to be washing their hands of boats carrying illegal immigrants once they leave their shores. On Saturday, a boat sinking off the French coast saw 6 people die and at least 58 being rescued. The first French lifeboat reportedly reached the incident 15 minutes after the RNLI, despite, of course, just being a few miles off their own coast. Now, as a rule, the French refuse to intervene with boats crossing the channel unless the vessel is in distress and they think that those on board are likely to cooperate. It is also worth saying that the human traffickers tell the people on those boats to not get on a French boat in case they end up back in France. So there we go. But the French are said to be intercepting just over half of the attempted crossings, with the number of police officers patrolling the beaches dropping by 1/5 this month. Why? Well, because there's a high number of them on annual leave. Of course it is, eh? At least they're not on strike. But right when we need them most, though, right when we need them most, stubborn, nonsensical and operating on their own time. Is this the most French thing you've ever heard? I'm joined now by journalist and author of the book France, A Nation on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. It's Jonathan Miller. Jonathan, good stuff. Look, are the French to blame for migrant deaths in the Channel?
Well, Patrick, good evening. And just a 5-second interlude to defend the Daily Mail, which is very scrupulous and checks facts very carefully. Are the French really have put Inspector Clouseau, I think, in charge of their efforts to stop the migration off the French coast? I know several people in the French police, and they tell me that the efforts are lackadaisical, to say the least. A couple of years ago, some gendarmes took it upon themselves to slice open the rubber boats with box cutters, and they were told to stop because the boats are private property. They're really turning a blind eye to a kind of Uber service across the Channel while taking millions and millions and millions of pounds from Britain. Is it entirely the fault of the French? Well, you can certainly ask why these trafficking gangs have been allowed to continue essentially unhindered. It must be known who these people are. The transportation of these rubber boats involves large lorries, yet the people responsible, who are making millions apparently, seem to be untouched. But on the other hand, the French, and the final point on the French side is the French are, frankly, quite happy to see these people leave.
Of course they are.
They are, they are a burden on the French state. They create law and order problems in France. Voters don't like it. And so the more they can get to England,
I mean,
the better.
and they also don't treat them well. I mean, we simply could not get away with, in this country, having a series of camps on our coastline where people are living in squalid.
Well, this is just complete squalor, and frankly, if you were an Afghan or a Syrian or somebody from sub-Saharan Africa, and you were housed in some camp that had no running water, no sanitation, no medical care to speak of.
Oh, I'd swim across.
You know, you'd probably swim across if you could. And of course, the British you have to say the British bear a great deal of responsibility, because Britain was extremely welcoming to these people. The Uber sets off from the Côte d'Opale, which is the sandy beaches near Calais, and are met halfway through the Channel by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which ferries them to England, where they're given accommodation and apparently cell phones and pocket money and housed in 4-star hotels. And it is the bright lights in the big city, and it's not a bad deal for them.
Well, and it's on offer. No, this is the thing. You know, it's all there. If you can make it here, then it is yours. Jonathan, just quickly, are there processing centres in France? You know, is there any way that an asylum seeker can actually genuinely just go and claim asylum in France? My point being is that they don't need to flee.
Well, there
France.
are, and you can claim asylum in France, but the French, I have to say, you know, while the British press is full of this story the last few days since this incident in which these unfortunate migrants drowned, this is not really as major a preoccupation in the French media as it is in the British media. The French have got their own problems with immigration and with immigrants and the families of immigrants, who have caused a great deal of a great number of problems in France, where we had recent riots. And of course, the French are obsessed with the problem that if you look across the Mediterranean, you have Africa, and in Africa there are 1 million poor people, many of whom would like to come to France, and they're very concerned about stopping the boats from landing on the Côte d'Azur. So Jonathan, it's a lose-lose situation.
It is indeed. Look, thank you very, very much. I would love to talk to you again at more length very, very soon, but we're bang out of time.
Anytime. I'm always here for you, Patrick. Take care.
Like his ghost haunted us for a second, but he's back again. Thank you very much. Jonathan Miller there, who is, of course, the author of the book France, a Nation on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. Very quickly now, I am joined by my presenter's friend this evening, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very much. Just what he heard there, which is that essentially the French police are basically being told to wave it through in a way.
Well, I don't think they are, and I don't think the evidence is there. I mean, there are a whole host of problems that we ought to appreciate from the French end. One is 100 miles of coastline, and if you ever look at that it's very difficult to police all of that. Now, we'd like to send Border Force staff onto the French coast to help do it. The French are worried about their sovereignty on that, as they have every right to. How would we feel about gendarmes wandering along Brighton Beach, for instance? But when it comes to, Jonathan was mentioning asylum applications, and yes, you can claim asylum in France. 137,000 people claimed asylum last year. About 50% got through. The British figure was 89,000.
Yeah, but what's the size of France? Well, the thing is, I would argue they've not got a bigger problem because they've got a much bigger country.
They've got a bigger country, but the same size populations.
Great, that's brilliant. They've got loads of room. They could take them all. We've found the answer. The answer is just house them all in France.
I don't think it's just actually a matter of having a room. You know, there was a great forest over there. Perhaps you'd like to go that direction. So it might need a bit more than that. When it comes down to whether the French are doing enough about stopping the boats coming across, the French naval policy, it follows maritime law, which says they don't interfere unless, as you've said, a boat's in distress or they're asked for help.
Lovely stuff. Nigel, thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Now, coming up, will RFK Jr. be the next US president? I'm going to be joined by renowned journalist Daphne Barak to talk about the Kennedys' political future, but not just that. Some shocking rumours about Barack Obama. Can't be true, surely. Find out later.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Okay, well, look, when it comes to American royalty, the Kennedy dynasty is one of the first names that comes to mind, and the family's tragic history, political influence might be the key to propelling its new figurehead to the top. Shows that he's more popular than both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, believe it or not, with a net positive rating of 19 points. The presidential hopeful spoke about life and political ambition in a new interview with the wonderful Daphne Barak, who's aired exclusively on GB News yesterday. Take a little look.
No, I think all of it, everybody in my family is aware of the risk. But, I think, life is filled with risks. So, and I think once Cheryl was convinced that there was a path to victory, and that I think she felt like, because I have a passion to do this, to solve some of these problems for our country, and I'm in a unique position to be able to do that, that she gave me the green light.
Well, fascinating stuff. I am very pleased to say that Daphne joins me right now. Daphne, thank you so much for coming in, for taking the time. I mean, with his family's history, I don't think I'd be going into politics. It's remarkable. Is he safe, do you think?
It's a very good question, Patrick, because I've been friend of the Kennedy since I was 20. And, I mean, of course, if you talk about Kennedy, the first 2 words come to you: assassination of JFK, assassination of RFK. And he asked for Secret Service protection. I remember when I was very young, I interviewed Jesse Jackson when he was a presidential candidate. There was lots of Secret Service. So nobody actually doubted it. And if you remember, Patrick, the law changed after his father was assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy, because before, of course, incumbent presidents have Secret Service. So it was the first time a candidate was assassinated. So to deprive his son, just because he's running against Biden, so the Biden administration to deprive his son from Secret Service, it's how do we say it nicely, not classy.
Well, it's not classy, no. I mean, essentially opening another man up to a great life-threatening risk so that he doesn't run against you is the kind of thing we might have seen the Clintons do, but there we go. So what do you think his chances are? I mean, he revealed a lot about himself in this interview with you. Addiction issues, for example. And actually, people quite like that. I think it makes him, in a way, sound quite normal.
I think it was the first personal interview he gave, and I think I'm getting lots of responses that he made him very relatable. He is the most likable candidate so far. I think his path for victory would be easy if we didn't have the RNC and DNC, the two parties in America. And by the way, most of them, much millions are coming to him from conservatives, and
really?
lots of support from conservative and Republican. So the DNC is trying to block him. They do have a big problem to block him because Kamala Harris, the vice president, is a no-no. Exactly, oh grief.
Yeah.
And nobody, I mean, even the DNC knows that there was a problem there. So with Bobby Kennedy getting all this support, celebrities, millions of dollars, and huge attention, if, as they would try to block Bobby Kennedy, his amazing growing voters would not vote for Joe Biden. They would vote for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump does support Bobby Kennedy.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a really fascinating permutation to this. Now, I wanted to ask you, I'll get you to expand on this. I'll get you to explain to our viewers and our listeners something about Eric Clapton.
So celebrities, as you know, are very important in American elections, and some of them do shy away to support candidates because they don't want the kind of thing. So I found myself, after I finished the interview with Bobby, it was in my friend, by the way, the beautiful scenery you see, it's a billionaire place, a friend of ours, and we had a VIP reception after, and there's suddenly somebody knocking on my shoulder, and it's Oliver Stone. I mean, you know, it doesn't happen every day. I did interview him in the past, but he was there. Woody Harrelson just said he was supporting Bobby. It doesn't happen, A-lister. Wow. And I have to break it here that Eric Clapton, which I have interviewed Eric and his and Lloyd Del Santo, the mother of the 4-year-old Connor who died tragically. It was a huge special. Yeah. Eric is very shy. Eric is recluse. Eric doesn't go to places. Eric Clapton, guys, is coming to a Bobby Kennedy VIP event September 18th, and he's going to perform.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I tell you what, that is a scoop that you've got right here. Just very quickly, whilst I've got you, I don't know if you've had a chance to digest this yet, but there was an interesting article. I'll just read the headline of it. I'll read the headline of it about Barack Obama. Apparently, a gay sex fantasy confession revealed in an unredacted letter to his ex.
Okay, so I actually read about it like you. I don't know what to make about it. Barack Obama, one thing I know, he has been very likable. I supported Hillary Clinton at the time. I hosted her at my home for a fundraiser. The moment Barack Obama invited me, I told her, Hillary, it's over. He has what you don't have. So Barack Obama is entitled to say anything. People would like him, as Bobby Kennedy. Either you have it or not.
All right. Look, Daphne, thank you very, very much. Daphne's right there. I could have spoken to you all night, but we're bang out of time. Dan Woodson, you've got a few seconds. What's coming up, you legend?
Patrick Christie's great to have you. Brilliant scoop there, isn't it? Eric Clapton back in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He would certainly be better than Biden. We've got lots on the way tonight. Calvin McKenzie, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, Neil Oliver, and the Superstar panel.
Oh, fantastic. Look, stay tuned, because Dan Woodson will be lighting up your screens for the next 2 hours. Thank you very much, everybody who's been watching and listening. I will be back with you tomorrow. Take it easy, wonderful people.
That warm feeling inside, from boxed boilers proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain today, clearing overnight, a few showers following, but many places will be fine during Tuesday as low pressure moves into the North Sea, taking its weather fronts with it. However, one occluded feature is just providing some additional rainfall to the northeast of England through the night, some damp weather continuing here. Eventually it becomes light to moderate rain. Showers across western areas, drier towards the southeast with some clear spells, but wherever you are, it's not going to be a cold night. It's 12 to 14 Celsius generally. And it will be a bright start to Tuesday, certainly across southern areas compared with Monday. Plenty of sunshine around. Still the remnants of the cloud and rain clearing from the northeast of England, southeast Scotland first thing, but by mid-morning that's all gone. And then the showers in the west tend to transfer eastwards through the day. The heaviest downpours will be across